Nimui's shoulders slumped.
Think about it. Not everyone can feel the presence of the gods, so those who can have a special duty. If I show weakness, if I show a moment of disbelief, then what hope is there for the people who want to believe? They're not really tricks, they're...
She paused, seeking the right word.
Insignia. Just like Uther's crown, and his torques, and his banner, and his stone at Caer Those things tell us that Uther is the High King, and we treat him as such. And when Merlin walks among his people, he has to wear his insignia too. It tells people that he touches the gods, and people fear him for that.
She pointed at the door with its splintered spear rent.
When I walked through that door naked, with 2 snakes and a bat hidden under a dead man's skin, I was confronting a king, his druid and his warriors. One girl, Derval, against a king, a druid and a royal guard. Who won? You. So the trick worked. But it wasn't my power that made it work. It was the power of the gods. But I had to believe in that power to make it work. And to believe, Derval, you must devote your life to it.
She was speaking with a rare and intense passion now.
Every minute of every day, and every moment of every night, you must be open to the gods. And if you are, then they will come. Not always when you want them, of course. But if you never ask, they'll never answer. But when they do answer, Derval, oh, when they do, it is so wonderful and so terrifying, like having wings that lift you high into glory.
Her eyes shone as she spoke. I'd never heard her speak of these things. Not long ago she had been a child, but now she had been to Merlin's bed and taken on his teaching and his power. And I resented that. I was jealous and angry, and I did not understand. She was growing away from me, and I could do nothing to stop it. Well, I'm open to the gods, I said resentfully. I believe them. I want their help. She touched my face with her bandaged hand.
You're going to be a warrior, Derval, and a very great one. You're a good person. You're honest. You're as foursquare as Merlin's tower, and there isn't any madness in you. Not a trace. Not even a wild, desperate speck. Do you think I want to follow Merlin?
Yes, I said, hurt. I know you do. I meant, of course, that I was hurt because she would not devote herself to me. She took in a deep breath and stared into the shadowed roof where 2 pigeons had flown through a smoke hole and were now shuffling along a rafter.
Sometimes, she said, I think I would like to marry, have children, watch them grow old myself, die. But of all those things, Derval,
she looked at me again.
I will only have the last. I can't bear to think of what will happen to me. I can't bear to think of enduring the 3 wounds of wisdom. But I must. I must.
The 3 wounds? I asked, never having heard of them before.
The wound of the body, Nimue explained. The wound to the pride.
And here she touched herself between her legs.
And the wound to the mind, which is madness.
She paused as a look of horror crossed her face.
Merlin has suffered all 3, and that is why he's such a wise man. Morgan had the worst wound to the body that anyone can imagine, but she never suffered the other 2 wounds, which is why she will never truly belong to the gods. I've suffered none of the 3, but I will. I must.
She spoke fiercely.
I must because I was chosen.
Why wasn't I chosen? I asked. She shook her head.
You don't understand, Derval. No one chose me except me. You have to make the choice for yourself. It could happen to any of us here. That's why Merlin collects foundlings, because he believes often children might have special powers, but only a very few do.
And you do, I said.
I see the gods everywhere, Nimue said simply. They see me.
I've never seen a god, I said stubbornly. She smiled at my resentment.
You will, she said, because you must think of Britain, Derval, as though she were laced with the ribbons of a thinning mist. Just tenuous strands here and there, drifting and fading. But those strands are the gods. And if we can find them and please them and make this land theirs again, then the strands will thicken and join to make a great, wonderful mist that will cover all the land and protect us from what lies outside. That's why we live here, on the Tor. Merlin knows that the gods love this place, and here the sacred mist is thick, but our task is to spread it.
Is that what Merlin is doing? She smiled.
Right at this moment, Derval, Merlin is sleeping, and I must too. Haven't you work to do?
Rents to count, I said awkwardly. The lower storehouses were filling with smoked fish, smoked eels, jars of salt, willow baskets, woven cloth, pigs of lead, tubs of charcoal, even some rare scraps of amber and jet. The winter rents payable at Beltane, which Howl had to assay, record on tallies, then divide into Merlin's share and the portion which would be given to the High King's tax collectors.
Then go and count,
Nimue said, as if nothing odd had happened between us, though she did reach over and give me a sisterly kiss.
Go, she said.
And I stumbled out of Merlin's chamber to face the resentful, curious stares of Norwenna's attendants, who had moved back into the great hall. The equinox came. The Christians celebrated the death feast of their god, while we lit the vast fires of Beltane. Our flames roared at the darkness to bring new life to the reviving world. The first Saxon raiders were seen far in the east, but none came close to Innis Widrin. Nor did we see Gunlias of Siluria again. Godovin, the clerk, supposed that the marriage proposal had come to nothing, and he gloomily forecast a new war against the northern kingdoms. Merlin did not return, nor did we hear any news of him. The Edling Mordred's baby teeth came. The first to show were in his lower gums, a good omen for a long life, and Mordred used the new teeth to bite Ralla's nipples bloody, though she went on feeding him so that her own plump son would suck a prince's blood along with his mother's milk. Nimue's spirits lightened as the days grew longer. The scars on our hands went from pink to white, and then to shadowy lines. Nimue never spoke of them. The High King spent a week at Caer Cadern, and the Edling was carried there for his grandfather's inspection. Uther must have approved of what he saw, and the spring omens were all propitious. For 3 weeks after Beltane, we heard that the future of the kingdom and the future of Norwenna and the future of Mordred would all be decided at a great high council, the first to be held in Britain for over 60 years. It was spring. The leaves were green, and there were such high hopes in the freshening land. The High Council was held at Glevum, a Roman town that lay beside the River Severn, just beyond Dumnonia's northern border with Gwent. Uther was carried there in a cart drawn by 4 oxen, each beast decorated with sprigs of may and saddled with green cloths. The High King enjoyed his ponderous progress through his kingdom's early summer, maybe because he knew this would be his last sight of Britain's loveliness before he went through Cruachan's cave and over the sword bridge to the other world. The hedgerows between which his oxen plodded were white with hawthorn. The woods were hazed by bluebells, while poppies blazed among the wheat, rye, and barley in the almost ripe fields of hay where the corncrakes were noisy. The High King travelled slowly, stopping often at settlements and villas where he inspected farmlands and halls and advised men who knew better than he how to layer a fulling pond or geld a hog. He bathed in the hot springs at Aqua Sulis, and was so recovered when he left the city that he walked a full mile before being helped once more into his fur-lined cart. He was accompanied by his bards, his counsellors, his physicians, his chorus, a train of servants, and an escort of warriors commanded by Owain, his champion and commander of his guard. Everyone wore flowers, and the warriors slung their shields upside down to show they marched in peace, though Uther was too old and too cautious not to make certain that their spear points were whetted bright each new day. I walked to Gleevham. I had no business there, but Uther had summoned Morgan to the High Council. Women were not normally welcome at any councils, high or low, but Uther believed no one spoke for Merlin as Morgan did. And so, in his despair at Merlin's absence, he called for her. She was, besides, Uther's natural daughter, and the High King liked to say that there was more sense in Morgan's gold-wrapped head than in half his councillors' skulls put together. Morgan was also responsible for Nowenna's health, and it was Nowenna's future that was being decided, though Nowenna herself was neither summoned nor consulted. She stayed at Inniswydrin, under the care of Merlin's wife, Gwendolen. Morgan would have taken no one but her slave, Sebille, to Gleevham, but at the last moment Nimue calmly announced that she was also travelling there, and that I was to accompany her. Morgan made a fuss, of course, but Nimue met the older woman's indignation with an irritating calm.
"I've been instructed," she told Morgan.
And when Morgan shrilly demanded by whom, Nimue just smiled. Morgan was double Nimue's size and twice her age, but when Merlin had taken Nimue to his bed, the power in Inniswydrin passed to her, and in the face of that authority, the older woman was helpless. She still objected to my going. She demanded to know why did Nimue not take Lunette, the other Irish girl among Merlin's foundlings. A boy like me, Morgan said, was no company for a young woman. And when Nimue still did nothing but smile, Morgan spat that she would tell Merlin of Nimue's fondness for me, and in that telling would lie the end of Nimue. At which clumsy threat, Nimue simply laughed and turned away. I cared little for the argument. I just wanted to go to Gleevham and see the jousting and hear the bards and watch the dancing, and, most of all, to be with Nimue. And so we went, an ill-assorted quartet, to Gleevham. Morgan, blackthorn staff in hand and gold mask glinting in the summer sun, stumped ahead, her limp making each heavy step into an emphatic gesture of disapproval at Nimue's company. Sebille, the Saxon slave, hurried 2 paces behind her mistress, with her back stooped beneath a bundle of bedding cloaks, dried herbs, and pots. Nimue and I walked behind, barefoot, bareheaded, and unburdened. Nimue wore a long black cloak over a white robe that she gathered at her waist with a slave's halter. Her long black hair was pinned high, and she wore no jewels, not even a bone pin to gather her cloak. Morgan's neck was circled with a heavy golden torque, and her dun-coloured cloak was clasped at her breast with 2 golden brooches, one cast as a triple-horned deer, and the other the heavy dragon ornament that Uther had given to her at Caer-Cadern. I enjoyed the journey. We took 3 days, a slow pace, for Morgan was an awkward walker, but the sun shone on us and the Roman road made our journey easy. At dusk we would find the nearest chieftain's hall and sleep as honoured guests in his straw-filled barn. Other travellers were few, and all made way for the bright blazon of Morgan's gold that was her symbol of high status. We had been warned against the masterless and landless men who robbed merchants on the high roads, but none threatened us, perhaps because Uther's soldiers had prepared for the High Council by scouring the woods and hills in search of brigands, and we passed more than a dozen rotting bodies staked at the road's sides as warnings. The serfs and slaves we met knelt to Morgan. Merchants made way for her, and only one traveller dared challenge our authority, a fierce bearded priest with his ragged following of wild-haired women.